Okay, looks like they're still trickling in, but everybody seems to be, the majority of people are here. So let's get started. Today we're going to do the ELA writing portion of the introduction. So if you were unable to attend last Wednesday, we have another introduction next Tuesday. So hopefully you have signed up for that. We also have the PowerPoint for that Core A and B introduction on our website. That will be in the chat for you, so you can get that information there. This PowerPoint, the ELA writing PowerPoint, is also on that site, as well as a rubric that you can view at your leisure. You might want to download that to have. So I'm here with Kevin Froughton. He's our project manager from Cognia, our contractor. I'm also here surrounded by our teacher consultants and our 2 ASL interpreters. So welcome everyone. Oh, and I am Deborah Hand. I always forget to introduce myself. And I'm with the department. So let's see what we got. We're going to outline the MCAS-Alt for ELA writing today and what we assess. It's a very quick, about 20 slides. So I don't think that we need to do questions in between. So put your questions on a parking lot, unless you have a clarifying question or I misspoke. One of the teacher consultants can help you with that, and we'll take your questions at the end. So what does ELA writing assess? And whenever we talk about ELA writing, the first thing teachers will say, well, oh, my students don't write. What I want to talk about is that this is expressive communication. It isn't the actual physical motor skills of writing. We want the students to be able to share their experiences, give their opinions, their preferences, talk about ideas and information. Also be able to create or discuss books and articles, favorite videos, or even video games, things that they are interested in, create stories or poetry. And that is what we're assessing, is that students' ability to express themselves. What it is not is holding a writing instrument of any type. It also is not copying letters or words. And it's definitely not tracing letters and words. You know how you go over them with yellow and then the student traces over yours? That is not what this is about. We do get quite a few of those, but please listen carefully. We want you to work with the speech and language pathologist for this assessment, not the occupational therapist, okay? So let's see what else we have to do for the assessment. You're going to use the student's primary mode of communication. What does that include? Well, here's a long list of how your student may communicate. And this is the perfect opportunity for you to talk to your district or your special ed director if you have a student that is unable to communicate, that has no way to communicate. Do they need an assistive technology evaluation so we can find out how to get this student something to communicate, whether it's low tech or high tech? We have to have a means of communication, and you can't assess a student on communication if they have no way to communicate. So I think we've pretty much covered all of the ways in which a student can communicate. And you can see in that oral language we have scribed by teacher. Remember that if you are scribing for the student, that you're going to do it verbatim. You're not going to change the way the student is saying it to make it grammatically correct. You are going to do it verbatim. And so what are the requirements? If you came this week, on the core concepts, you know that you need a skill survey for every strand that you do. So you're going to complete a writing skill survey, which we'll show you in a moment. One baseline, and that baseline you can do today when you're done with this. You want it to be done prior to your final samples. And The baseline should be a way for you to see where the student's needs lie. Then you have from now until you submit this portfolio to do 3 final writing samples. And in this case, we're not looking for the progress like we do over the data chart. We're looking for 3 final writing samples completed by the student. It's authentic work done by the student. And each one of those final writing samples will be on a different topic. Along with those writing samples, you're going to score a state-provided rubric, and we'll go over those and what we're looking for. Attached to those writing samples, you're going to give us a work sample description. And that really helps us to see and set up how you created this sample with the student. What did you do? How did the student attempt it, or what was their participation in this? Students who are using access skill, even though they will not be creating a written product themselves, it'll be created by either the teacher or the peer, must have a written product. And that is on that written product, you're going to tell us how the student participated in the creation of that written product. But even students on access skills will have to have a written product submitted for them. And you can see, remember we talked about it at the core introduction, that the educator's manual on the top of this slide, if you want more information, that's where you're going to go. So here's that ELA skill survey, and you're going to fill this out once. You can see it's got 9 different questions, and this should give you an idea as to where your student will be. And then this one is a little bit different because there is only one entry point, so it isn't going to narrow down an entry point, but it should give you some insight as to where your student is as far as the needs go. So I think it'll show you based on the 25 to 50%, you're going to look in that area as to what you might want to work on while you're working on these final samples. So I think the next one will just highlight where they are, and that's up to you what you want to work on as you continue working on the final samples. So I don't know if you're like me, but I always like a visual of the requirements. So here it is. You see the ELA writing skill survey, plus a work description for the baseline, and then your baseline. You notice that there is no rubric for the baseline. You don't have to score that. If you want to put the independence on it for yourself, that's fine, but it's not required for us. Then you're going to have 3 work description samples that are going to go with those 3 final writing samples, all on different topics. You're not going to do the same writing 3 times. You're going to do 3 different writing samples, and you are going to pre-score each of those writing samples and submit them. So they should be dated the same, and Kevin's going to show you a change to that when you see the Forms and Graphs program, but you won't know it's a change because you're new. Sorry. Okay, moving on. So these 3 different final writing samples can be a combination of any of the following text types. Opinion argument, which talks about a claim or a preference. And all of these text types are based on a topic or a text. So you can read a story, like for the informative explanatory text, perhaps you are looking at a science text and you want to get those facts and ideas in. You can certainly use that text to write about. The student can give you information. Also, you can do a writing in a narrative, which you can tell a story, whether real or imagined. And, you know, students love to talk about, make things up or tell you their story about their, you know, their trip to Disney or something fun like that. Or poetry. Now, poetry comes under the narrative text type, and that uses figurative language. And sometimes that's very helpful for our student. It kind of tells a story, paints a picture with words, and that's very helpful for our students. Again, you can choose from those 3 different text types. You can do all 3 in one text type, or you can do one of each. That's your choice, your decision. And I want to reiterate that this is always done in the student's primary mode of communication. And the whole portfolio should be done in the student's primary mode of communication. So I remember I said the measurable outcome, there's only one. So there's only one entry point for writing. The access skills is a little different, but for entry points, the only thing that changes is dependent on the text type that you're using. So here's an example using narrative. So the student will use his or her primary mode of communication to express or create a writing sample that is based on a narrative, and then you will fill in the percentage of independence. Okay. What will change there is what's in red. So obviously if you pick opinion or informative, that will change. So as I said, no rubric is needed for the samples, for the baseline samples. And the baseline sample can be anything. It can be a graphic organizer. A lot of teachers use different kinds of graphic organizers. I'm sure you may have a system in place for writing. Maybe you just want them to tell you something and you're going to write it for them. And then if they can't read it, you read it back to them. Is that what you want to say? But that's just the baseline. You want to see where they are. How are they getting their thoughts out? Maybe you use pictures. Maybe they want to put pictures together to give you an idea of what they're trying to say. So you're going to include a completed rubric with each of the final ones. And when this gets submitted and we score it, we're going to verify your scores that you put on those rubrics. So unless you are way off base, like it's an access skill and you give them all 4s, we're not going to change it. So let's take a look at what we do score. So these are the areas we score. The level of complexity. Remember the level of complexity that we talked about when we did the strand cover sheet. That's either access skills or entry points. In this rubric area, we're looking for the skills and concepts in these 4 areas: expressions of ideas and content, knowledge of conventions, text structure, and use of vocabulary. So the demonstration of skills and concepts are those 4 areas. You'll check off whether it's entry point or access skills. You will put the independence, which is how many prompts you've used, and measure that by the word or the sentence. So if the student is able to write sentences, you might want to consider the independence by sentence. If your student is very low and only does a few words, you might want to do your prompts that way. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes about prompting for writing. And self-evaluation. This is included on that work sample description, but not on the rubric. So you're going to add it. You can add it, see attached, or you can say that the student chose the topic and put that on the work description label. So here's the writing rubric. And on the top part, you see the level of complexity, and that'll be either access skills. Just one click, I think. There you go. And then entry points. So those are your choices at the top. And then on the side, you see it's the demonstration of skills and concept are those 4 areas on the column on the left. And I think we highlight that. So what you're going to want to do, and we have this in that material site that we put in the chat for you, you're going to review each of these rubric areas. So you probably want to do that prior to giving them the writing, so that you know what you're trying to improve. So if they are at a 1 where they're just using single words or just pictures, Maybe you want to see if we can get them up to a 2. We're not telling you you have to move anywhere on that, but as a teacher, you want to obviously help them improve their expressive communication. So look at these various columns and see what you can do to help them move along on that rubric area. Okay. So here it is a little bit more clear. If you want to take just a moment to look through them, you can see. You also should note that there's nothing in there about spelling. Okay. If you can understand what they're saying with their creative spelling, that's fine. All right. So I would download that when you have a moment, maybe after this, have it available to you, or if you can do both and have it in the background to look at, that would be good. Okay. So we'll move on. Okay. So we want you to use this standardized writing rubric, right? That way everybody's on the same page and using the same exact scoring. So we just carefully reviewed it, which I think you should do when you get off here. Maybe highlight areas that you think your student will need to improve on. You're going to base your score only on the student's contribution. And if the student is a 1 or 2, we just talked about whether or not it's things like fill in the blank, it's definitely a 1. If you provide sentence starters and the student only fills in the blank, like my favorite color is blank, then that's a 1, okay? Because you're providing the most of that information. So 1 or 2, it could be a 2 if they're putting a few pictures, single pictures together. It could be a 3 or 4 if we go to the next one. So this is just a reminder that if you're doing access skills, all skills are given by the teacher. I mean, all text is provided by the teacher. So that's going to be a 1. It's an automatic. You put in 2 for access skill, it's going to automatically show you 1s in all the demonstrations of skills and concepts. What will change will be the percent of independence. So let's talk about that percent of independence for a moment. So the number of prompts is relative to the total number of words or sentences. So I talked about sentence starters. So sentence starters are a prompt. You're giving that text. Depending on how much information comes after that the student provides would be helpful. So if the student answers in 1 or 2 words, it's going to be a very high percentage of prompting and a very low percentage of independence. Say the student talks about they went on a field trip and they got a pumpkin, and they said, you tell them we went to Wardsberry Farm and you got a pumpkin, and they tell you, yes, it was a pumpkin, it was a fun ride, but you want more information. So you say things like, well, was it a big pumpkin? What color was the pumpkin? So you're going to help them add to that writing. That's a prompt. Even though the student might add it to their sentence, you have still prompted them. That word wouldn't have been there if you hadn't helped them. So like the independence where we're trying to get the student closer to the answer, in writing, you're trying to get them to have more information. And so you're adding, that's considered a prompt. If you have a student that writes maybe a paragraph, that you're very fortunate, but if they do, you might want to count your independence by the sentence and not the word. And again, I talked about this, that the scores will verify your score. That's all they're going to do. They only change it if it does not reflect the evidence that you have given us. Okay. So now it's your turn. Take a look at this. If you have a pencil handy, write down what Lacey said. She said, I eat potatoes, turkey, comma, apple pie. Okay. So this is one of the final samples, and it was scribed by the teacher. You can see the teacher just wrote what she said, and maybe the student told her she wanted those things capitalized. So looking at that, write that sentence down. Remember, it will try to pop back, but we're going to give you the rubric, pop the rubric back up for you and give you a minute. We know it's an entry point. So now look at the demonstration of skills and concepts. And then we'll put up a survey for you to determine what each of these rubric areas, what you would score this. So if you should be able to see the poll, what would you do for expressions of ideas and content? 1, 2, 3, or 4? I'm just giving people a moment to fill that out. What would you give them for knowledge of conventions, text structure, and use of vocabulary? There it is. I eat potatoes, period, turkey, comma, apple pie, period. Just in case you needed to see that again. And when we're done, we'll share it with all of you. The other part of this is we weren't there when Lacey wrote this. So, that makes a difference. You know your student, you know how much you had to help to get that in there. But we're not worried about the independence right now. We're just looking at the sentence that's been put out there. Having a word wall around your room, that's fine. That's not a prompt. Word wall is great. They have to know to look there. They have to know to pick them. Okay. It looks like we've got a pretty good, what do you think, Kev? Put him, nope, still working. Okay. Well, hopefully everybody had a chance to fill it in that wanted to. And there's the results. I'm assuming you can see it. So we had 16% thought 1, 56% thought 2 in this area for expressions of ideas and content. 28% thought it would be a 3. And 1% said 4. In the knowledge of conventions, 18% thought 1, 67% thought 2, 14% thought 3, and 1% thought 4. I think there's one person out there that thinks it should be a 4. Text structure, more people again think 2. And use of vocabulary, also 2. So let's take a look and see how we scored it. So for expressions and ideas, the writing sample related to assignment only minimally, included no or only one detail. Description was used, or one detail or description. So we gave it a 2. If you gave it a 1, that's okay, but I think it was on target. So I think I would give it a 2, but doesn't mean it's wrong if you gave it a 1. A 3 is kind of a stretch, but if you thought so, you thought it was informative, and the main idea was evident, okay, that's good. Knowledge of conventions, what did we give it? We also gave that a 2. The general meaning could be understood, though use of grammar was limited, okay. Didn't have run-on sentences because it didn't have too many sentences, right? So that's what we gave it. Text structure, again, a 2. Sentence fragments, it did have one sentence fragment, one complete sentence, kind of right down the middle. And use of vocabulary, I would say it wasn't a 1 because it was related to the assignment. You could have given it a 3, but I'm not sure that it really had descriptive language. But if you gave it a 3, we wouldn't change that score. So we would change it if you gave it a 4. What the student submitted does not reflect a 4. If you look at the text structure, it says a paragraph of at least 3 related, well-constructed sentences used to express ideas. That definitely was not that. So this just gives you an idea of what you're going to do when your student fills it out. And you can certainly work with the student to show them this rubric, and that's a great way of self-evaluating. So next we will take a look at students who are working at access skill levels. So remember, we talked about access skills as students that are working on only communication or motor skills. Okay, they only have emerging symbolic language. So this student's measurable outcome says that they will activate a device within 15 seconds of the initial cue in an activity related to the creation of a written product. So you can see right there that John's written product looks very nice, right? But John was activating a switch with pre-recorded sentences for a narrative of her winter vacation. Okay, so the student didn't write this. They participated in the creation of this. Maybe the parents helped to give them information about the vacation, and the teacher had this pre-recorded sentences, and the student was just activating the switch within 15 seconds. So let's take a look at what that would look like. And that was at 25% independence. So the rubric would be access skills. And once access skill is checked off, you will see that the demonstration of skills and concepts are all in the area of 1 for the rubric area. Okay, that won't change. And if you have more questions about access skills, we have access skill PowerPoint for writing. We also have someone on our team that would be happy to discuss that with you. So ask your questions in the questions and answers when we're done, and you can get those answered. Supporting documentation is so helpful when a student is using a communication device. So as you can see here, the student is working on using their dynamic display. And this is this is something that takes time for our students. It takes a lot of practice and training as to how to use these devices. They have to find the category they want, then they have to get into that category and find the word they want. This takes a lot of time and energy for them. So when you see something like this, the teacher has captured their sentence and then wrote on it for us to see. So the teacher helped them with my favorite color is, and then the student independently chose purple. Okay, again, prompted because it is, and the student chose pretty. So they're working on using this device, how to find things. I'm sure that the prompting is part of that piece. At the end, the teacher would submit those sentences on a written product. Okay, this is great. We can see the context and how the student was doing it and exactly how they were prompted or whether they were independent. Same with the other one. I like to talk with, and then they may have pictures of other students and they put the picture on there. So this is just helpful for us to get an idea of how the student is using the device and how much help they're needing. It's also helpful for the teacher to see where they may need a little extra support. So that is that wraps up that. We're going to talk about the skill survey. Absolutely, positively must fill that out. You're going to include that with the work sample description for each final sample. You're going to have the writing sample reflect expressive communication by the student. We know that you teachers are very smart and that you can write, but we want to know what the student can do, how they can express themselves. Okay, so if you edit, that's fine, but that's a prompt, and make sure that you note that. And again, I'm going to reiterate that final samples for students that are working at access level must include a final product, and that documents how the student participated in the creation of that product. And again, if you need that, there's an access skill PowerPoint just for writing, and it has more samples for you to view that should be helpful. I don't think this is a problem anymore, but when we first started doing the writing, for some reason, teachers decided to sequence bathrooming, and it was not pretty, and it was not something we want in our assessment. Yes, there are parts of bathrooming that are important skills that our students need to learn, but we don't need to put it in a state assessment. There are so many other topics that your students would love to discuss: pets and family and trips and video games and movies. So consider how to engage your student, how to get more information from them. But please, if you put anything in there that's bathroom related, we won't score it 1 and we won't count it as part of the final 3. Okay. So now, Kevin, am I there yet? Nope. Okay. So this is the fun part. This is one we got from a teacher a couple of years ago. And it's the teacher gave the student pictures, and then the student had to caption them. So the first one says, "The cat is not happy about her suit. The back of her tail looks like those things you dust with." And the second one, it says, "Oh no, lunch lady. The kids are going to eat me and the students are hungry. I am not like the other cafeteria food." And the last one is probably the funniest. "It's when I first got potty trained. It didn't go as planned. I tried to hold myself up and I just literally fell in." So can you imagine the kids doing this? They probably had a blast thinking about things they could write. So be creative, make sure that you have what you need. And I'm sorry, am I? Okay.
Yep, I'll take it from here, Deb.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. So thank you, Deb. So This is Kevin. I'm quickly going to jump back into, if you were with us the other day for the core concepts, back into forms and graphs to show you. I mentioned the other day that writing and science are different, so we ignored those in our initial walkthrough. So I'm going to hop back into that student that we were working on and show you how to create a writing strand in there. So give me 1 second while I switch things up and share the website. But before I get to there, I just want to, I put it in the chat at the start. I'll put it in again, that materials page that Deb keeps mentioning where the PowerPoints are all located. If you, the intro, which is part of the series that you're in now, is right at the top. But if you scroll down, that access skills PowerPoint she was referencing for ELA writing, and then just standard access skills, it's kind of smack in the middle here. So that's it's not a recorded presentation, it's just a PowerPoint, but you can get the slides right here. So again, that's kind of right in the middle of this fall training materials page. So let's get back into forms and graphs. So if this is the first, if you skipped that first session and you're coming next week to that core concepts, this will, we're jumping the gun a little bit for you. I don't think there's many of you, but just know when you come next week, you'll get what kind of led up to this. So just follow along now and it'll make sense when you see how we got to this point in that first session. So once we log in to our forms and graphs account, we can go right to our student list. And you'll remember earlier this week, we built that Michael Scott math strand that I was showing. So we can use Michael. Again, writing is for every grade that you're going to assess, 3 through 8 and 10. So we can go to portfolio. I'm going to do it wrong again, just to drive the point home. Normally you want to do your skill survey first. So I'm going to do it the wrong way and show you again what happens. Going to go to my list of strands. I've got my math hanging out here that we created earlier this week. Add a new strand. Go to cover sheet. We know we want writing, and that's in ELA. And you've got a couple different options. They all work identical. It's just about that text type. So you've got a choice for opinion argument, informative, or narrative. It doesn't matter functionally which one you do. They all work the same. So we'll just pick opinion. And it's going to say, no, thank you. And it's going to say, you can't complete this until you do the skill survey. So I can hop right into my skill survey with this link. 1 second. Add a new skill survey. And even though there are different text types, one skill survey covers them all. It's just under the banner of this text types and purposes. So you'll only see one skill survey for writing. Select. Give it a date. Oops. And then you're just from top to bottom. In this case, it only has 9 slots to fill out. You're just clicking along for the skills of how independently they can do these 9 skills. I can save this. Now I can hop right back into my strands list. And now that I completed this, it should unlock that strand for me that I created. So here I see it hanging out, my writing for opinion. And now it lets me into the strand cover sheet. You'll notice the top of this looks pretty much the same as what we built for the math one. It's carried over the student's name. We knows what strand I'm in, learning standards. Again, just a drop down. If you want to see the full text of the learning standards, you can look them up in the resource guide here. But remember to click the get LS text, get learning standard text, and it'll drop in that actual learning standard text. Still have our level of complexity here. Remember, it'll do it for me when I select using this button, find entry points. So far the same. Where it takes a bit of a turn is once you click this find entry points button. It still kind of looks the same, but we have one entry point. Remember, we had all these tabs up here for different grades that we could go down. I have one single entry point that is just for the text type that I'm in. as Deb mentioned, the access skills, those are based on a very specific skill of how they interact with how they're using the content. So those are still selectable choices, but a vast majority are entry points, and there's only one. So you click it and it'll still build that out for you, grab the student's first name. And this time it only asks for what's the targeted independence, because the accuracy we get by way of the rubrics. So it's only going to ask for the independence, and you just replace it with a percentage as before. So replace your XX with whatever that targeted goal is, and that builds out your measurable outcome. Again, this box is here for if you have the fairly common in writing that the teacher scribe is a accommodation or modification that they're using. So you can put it here, that all work, and you can certainly include it in the individual works as well. But it's just there for you to kind of describe the scenario that might not be apparent just looking at the work itself. Don't have to use it, but it's there if you want it. And then we come down. So before, you'll remember we had different types of work sample labels, and we have bar graphs and line graphs and field data charts. No charts for writing. It's pretty straightforward. There's only really two things. There's a work description in both baseline and final form, and then the scoring rubric. And that's it. That's all you have to do for there. Most people start with the baseline, so I'll show you first. That's what we'll click baseline. We get a sample for baseline. Go to evidence page, and it's pretty much what we saw the other day. So instead of, again, asking for accuracy, it's just saving that independence, because accuracy is on the work itself by way of rubrics. And then what did they do? What's the brief description? And then self-evaluation. Again, you can do an attachment, you can describe how it happened, but it's just a box there for self-evaluation. So that's a baseline. The thing to remember, we're going to hop right back into the string cover sheet, is the baseline doesn't need a rubric. So just the baseline work sample, and you're done with your baseline. Attach the actual sample, and that's it. And then what most people do is they build these out in pairs. So you'll need a work description final, and attached to that with the work is a rubric that you've scored that you saw in the PowerPoint. So final, and then rubric. It'll let you put them in any order. You can do all your finals and then your rubrics below. I find most people like to keep it bundled together, because then you know they're sort of linked when you see them one after the other. I'll show you again. It's particularly helpful to use this little my description. So when I go into the evidence page, this yellow box is what populates that in that grid. Because I'm going to have 3 sets of writing with a rubric, final with a rubric, final with a rubric. If I just give it a word about just something, so I know what sample that is, it'll help you out, and you'll see that as we build out in just a second. So we'll give it a date, the independence, and just a text box here, student, just as before. So now you're just describing the activity that took place to create that final sample that you're attaching with this. And then again, self-evaluation. And that's it. I mean, these are pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot of text boxes to fill in. So this is just kind of setting the stage of what you're attaching this to for evidence. We can go back to the strand cover sheet. And you'll notice that pumpkins is sitting in there now. We can go into the rubric, and a lot of people just find it helpful to just either give it the same names. Some people say that it's the rubric. And you want to make sure that the date matches what you have on the work description label. So we're using today. And then you get the rubric. So it's a scrolling rubric that'll go from top to bottom. And all you need to do is just hover. You'll see it turns to a little hand. You hover over the rubric section that you want and click, and it'll turn kind of a blue-gray, purpley color to let you know that that's what you've selected. And then you're just working it from top to bottom. I will show you, if you are access skills, Deb mentioned that if you are truly have a student that's functioning on access skills for the writing sample, it's always going to be a 1 for expression, knowledge, text structure, and vocabulary. The program knows this, and if you click access skills, it's going to just put it in there for you. It'll just whoop, put them right in. If you did that by accident, you can go back to entry points and then just hover and click on what's meaningful. But every time I click access skills, it's going to put them back at 1, because it truly should be all 1 for those areas if you're on access skills. Then we get to independence, which is included but slightly separated from the rest because it interacts a little bit different. It catches people. So you're just clicking away up here. But as soon as you get down here and try to click, you can't see me, but I'm clicking, clicking, clicking. It will not select that because it needs the actual percentage. You'll notice these are all ranges, 0 to 25, 26 to 50% independence. So over on the left underneath independence, there's a drop down. Give it the percent independence and it'll select the proper range for you. So it does catch people. They click, 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 and then I can't get independence to lock in. Just remember, drop down. You got to give it an actual percentage and it'll populate that for you. We can save. And if you want to print them all separately and attach as you go, you can certainly do one at a time. There is a printer friendly here, and it will generate, strip away everything away and give you a printable version. I'll show you again that there are a way to generate them all at once in one shot rather than one at a time. But we'll go back to our strand cover sheet. And just for sake of showing you the basic look of what it should look like. So when you're done with writing, you should have a baseline and then something that looks like this. So a final with a rubric, a final with a rubric, and a final with, guess what, a rubric. So you'll see how these are kind of handy with the descriptions. When you get all these stacked up, it'll let you know what's matched with what. And if you have to go back in and tweak something or finish something off, you'll know which one to click into, because otherwise they're all just generically named. So it's just there for you. It doesn't impact the scoring. It's just there to let you know this is that one, and I want to go right into that, and making sure you have a rubric with a final. So it's help. You don't have to, but it's helpful to just kind of link them together with a similar name. It only helps you know that you got what you need. And that's really it. Writing's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot going on. You're just getting some labels and doing a rubric for a writing sample. Repeat that 3 times with a baseline and you're done. And back at the top, we have similar functionality with our printing from the strand cover sheet only. You get the print options. So you can do just the cover sheet by itself, or we can do multiple. It's going to print some blank stuff because we didn't fill out the rest, but that's okay. So you'll see it gives us our strand cover sheet, looks back, pulls in that skill survey that I did, get my baseline, final 1, final 2, and final 3, which are blank because I didn't do anything, but here they are. And then the rubrics, much like the data chart that lives by itself, those are grouped here. So print rubrics right here at the top, telling me landscape gives me a better rubric. I get that one, and then we get some blanks of ones that we didn't do but created. So there you go. I know it's quick, but again, feel free to log in if you've got one going, create a fake writing strand and just click around and play with it. But that's the basic beats of how you do writing in the program for forms and graphs. So now I'll kick it back over to Deb, who will wrap it up and take any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you for pointing out that writing is for every grade 3 through 8 and high school. Same requirements for everyone. Everyone has to do writing. So just a reminder. I know if you were here on Monday, we did talk about, or Tuesday, but just a reminder. So I'm going to look and see, it looks like a lot of questions have been answered by our teacher consultants. So let me go in and see if we have some questions that I can read. I think I mentioned a word bank. A word bank can be, you have a word wall. The word bank, if you give the students the word bank for just what they're writing, it's a little bit difficult to tell what they came up with. If the word wall is there, they're making their own choices. So And that's true even if you're using a device where everything, if you're talking about bubbles and then you only give them pictures and text that have bubbles on it, then you're providing the text for them. You want to see what they can generate themselves. If you have a word bank, they can go up and a word wall, then they can use their own sentences and find the words they need. Sentence starters are fine, and fill-ins, anything is fine for baseline. You are not submitting a rubric with those with the baseline. So someone asks if you can use sentence starters or fill-ins, that's fine. But remember that you are you're not scoring it. So you just want to get that baseline to help you with as much information as possible going forward as to what the students need. So I think, let's see, I'm trying to see if there's some here that was everybody can ask. So here's a good question. Can we use a baseline writing sample and a piece of evidence on the same topic, but with different dates? Yes. So one baseline. So you only need one baseline. So if you complete that baseline with as a final writing sample, that is fine. So you only need one baseline. So that's all you'll submit is one baseline. But if the evidence is the same topic as that baseline, that is perfectly acceptable. Can the student submit a writing sample that the student typed? Absolutely. They can definitely type their responses. Again, the baseline, don't get too hung up on the baseline. This is just like, you could go back today, this afternoon, and have them write about what they're going to do on the weekend, or tell you about what they're going to do on the weekend, or use pictures to talk about the weekend. Just want to get some information about how they express themselves, where they're going to need help going forward. And then you've got months to work on these areas. So that baseline should just help to inform. It's just for us to see that first step and to help you. And that skill survey shows you their challenges as well as their strengths and what you need to focus on. So it's a nice tool to use. Again, if you have access skills, make sure that you go in and take a look at that PowerPoint. It's very helpful. So it says, typically before writing, we do a graphic organizer and turn the graphic organizer into a final writing piece. Is the graphic organizer and planning for writing considered prompting? It depends on how much help you're giving them. Now, if the graphic organizer just has their ideas on it, then it depends on how that turns into a sentence. Do you have to prompt them to make full sentences? Okay, so it's great. A lot of teachers are going to use the graphic organizers, but it's how much help they need to get that graphic organizer turned into a nice paragraph or even just a sentence. Does the baseline need to match the text type you're using? No, not at all. The baseline is independent. Each of those writing samples that you're going to score are independent, and they need to just be on different topics, just not the same writing done 3 times. I will try to get some examples of writing back on our samples and strands. That's on the MCAS-Alt website. We do have some samples. I don't think I have the writing up there right now, so I will try to get some writing back up there. We don't have a standard graphic organizer. Someone asked if we have a standard graphic organizer, and you don't have to use a graphic organizer. You are free to teach your writing in however that works best for your student. So we don't have a standard graphic organizer. You do not need to submit the graphic organizer with the final. Remember, you only need one baseline. So if they're completing a graphic organizer to brainstorm for every writing activity, you don't need to submit it. You only need that final product. And give yourself time. Remember that the kids are going to change and develop over the next few months. And by the time, February, March comes along, they should be, there's progress that's made. So keep doing the writing and then changing out the one that you think you want to save with maybe the one that comes along that's a little better. And have the students involved in that, have them look at the rubric and keep their writing folders handy and, see which ones you want to put into the portfolio. That's a great way to look at their work and self-evaluate. So the question was describing the photos. Would they be considered one final, or are all three one? These were submitted as 3 final samples. Okay, they're 3 different topics, 3 different pictures. They're 3 different pictures, and they were captioning the picture. Okay, but those were submitted as 3 final samples. So we have about a minute left. I just want to remind you that if you're in grades 5, 8, or high school and you're doing science this year, you would like to come this afternoon at 1 o'clock. We're going to be doing the science and tech engineering. And also we have that again on the 21st, and that'll be 10 o'clock in the morning. Today it's at 1, and next week it's at. There's my email if you have questions. If you have a question about a specific student, feel free to reach out to me. And if I'm not presenting, I will certainly be happy to get right back to you. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Some of you I think I will see this afternoon. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you to all of the folks that helped to answer questions, our interpreters, and have a great day.